Looking at decision cards, how they can be used, and some of the basic configuration options available in the FinPower Connect user interface. Next week, our code team will be covering some scripting options and a more in-depth overview for decision cards. Decision cards in FinPower Connect are a facility that can be used for automated decision making for things like system lending approvals, but also things like ID 100-point requirement checking, like our sample decision card built in as an example to check a client has sufficient ID evidence as per the Australian 100-point requirement system, or even deciding whether a commission is payable. They are a very powerful tool that have the potential to save a lender a lot of time, which has pleasant flow-on effects for their customers with quicker turnaround times, for example. Decision cards allow the adding of rules based on conditions set using the FinPower Connect business layer to be checked and either met or failed that contribute to either a straight outcome or an overall result of points resulting in a pass, fail, or refer outcome overall. This is to tailor the decision card to its required assessment purpose. Decision cards can be as simple or as complex as they need to be. In a way, the sky's the limit, given the ability to add additional scripting in conjunction with the available out-of-the-box decision card rule wizard and its inbuilt rule condition builder. However, it's important to note that due to its complexity, decision cards are best built by a technically able person familiar with constructing logical conditions or scripting and familiar with the FinPower Connect business layer. So today we're focusing more on what decision cards can do and where they slot into other FinPower Connect functionality and how to prepare to have a decision card made. Once a decision card has been created, tested, and is ready for use, it can be called on out of the box by things like workflows and client groups for identification. They can also be called by script, either on a specific event or by a script using a custom action to call the decision card. Calling them by workflow is common, so that the step appears for the user at the opportune time in the wider application process, for example. It can also be automated so that the workflow doesn't appear back in a user's work list until after the decision card has produced a result, depending on the configuration. Further steps can also be set for action based on the outcome of a decision card. For example, if the outcome is refer, the workflow might send an email to the appropriate team advising there is an application that requires a manual review. It may also then reassign the workflow to a credit manager. A fail result may close the workflow. What happens is entirely based on the purpose and the process involved. Looking at the client groups example, you can define a decision card on the client groups record, which you access from the admin menu. Defining a decision card here then flows through to the client record itself on the identification page. You can see a result is up here, and when the review button is clicked, it provides further details showing the results of the decision card. In this case, a fail result because only 80 of the required 100 points have been met. Decision cards themselves are maintained again by the admin library by selecting the decision card option. On the general page, you'll find the usual code and description fields where you can name your decision card. The next section down is important. This controls the basis for the decision card and the source. The basis has 3 available options. These are rules, script with rules, and script only. For the rules only option, this uses the out-of-the-box decision card rule wizard and the condition builder. Script with rules has the ability to use both UI constructed rules and scripting, and the third, as described, uses scripting only. The source has 5 options available: account, account application, applicant, client, or custom. The decision source defines what type of objects will be supplied to the decision card. For example, client will make available both the client and the client's identification, as well as client-related functionality. It's important to keep in mind when constructing rules using the wizard, and for those familiar with the business layer, provides an insight on how to achieve the result thereafter in terms of accessing the right information. The notes section can be used for any text, but as an example, a good description of the decisions card's purpose could be used. Moving on to the options page, this is where we set the base score, the pass, refer, and fail scores. We can choose whether we allow a result of refer or whether the card will have a straight pass or fail. The base score can be set so that all subsequent rules either add or subtract to this value. Pass scores determine what score is required for the result to be a pass. Again, if refer is not being used, anything below this score will be a fail. If you're using the refer option, any score result that's between refer and pass will give an outcome of refer for manual assessment, and anything below refer will be a fail. The fail score, as with others, can be set, and any score equal to or below is a failure. Each of the outcome options have the ability to set a message which will appear in the summary on the decision card for the user to see. An example of possible messages that could be set as showing, like the refer message of manual decision required, refer to credit manager. Rules. The rules area allows the building of rules based on logic. It's like how scripting is completed, but available in some cases to be built out of the box using the decision card rule wizard and the condition builder. There are multiple different rule types that can be used. For a brief overview of these, we can see in this image here definition of said rules. A normal rule tests a condition and updates a value. In other words, a score which can impact the overall decision outcome. There are also if blocks which also have else and end if blocks as part of their structure. Exit rules, which are great and similar to normal rules, except instead of adding to an overall score, set an immediate outcome if the condition is met and stops any further rule processing. You might use this rule type to exclude certain things quickly, such as if a top-up application is received on a loan, a workflow is added. A decision card might be used as one of the very first steps with an exit rule with a condition of, is the account overdue? If the result is true, an outcome of fail is set and potentially the top-up is automatically declined. A text matrix rule, when configured, can search for a range of text answers to one question. For example, you might look for several identification types, which are all stored in the same place. The information rule type allows the entry of text to include additional non-scoring items to a decision outcome. And a set outcome rule sets an outcome based on the condition result rather than allocating points. The difference between this rule type and an exit rule is that depending on where it sits with the other rules, it may continue to process subsequent rules, which can be useful if a user needs to see all the points in which the account, client, application, etc. would have failed. As previously mentioned, the person developing the decision card should have a good working knowledge of how to formulate logical conditions to ensure these rules work as accurately as possible. As these conditions work in the same way scripting can, it would be significantly easier for someone with this knowledge to construct a robust decision card. This is what the rules page itself looks like. Using our sample dc.app decision card, and we can see some of the rule types listed here, including descriptions that appear in the card itself, the actual conditions, and the resulting messages. It also includes a code which scripting can recognize and take action on. For example, here, scripting is involved and will update the smart tags with information. Rule 9. When met, will return a description of expenses greater than income and a message of expenses with a figure generated by the script and income with the income total figure also being produced by the script. We can see this one in action by going to our test page and running this on our standard test account. So we can see here that the script has pre-populated the expenses, drawing from the client statistics, I believe in this case, and the income. And we can see that we have failed on both of these rules here. For those that will be making the decision cards, we navigate back to our rules page. The button strip below is very useful. It includes a button to add an if block all at once, which if I click this button here, you'll see automatically also adds an else and an end if block. There is also the standard other tools along the button strip here, including the add button, which launches the wizard we've mentioned previously. As mentioned, we're not going to go through this particular wizard specifically today. However, next week's session with the code team to cover the more technical aspects of decision cards will hopefully cover some aspects of this. Before constructing a decision card or requesting that one be made by your Intersoft dealer or code team staff member, to build the decision card on your behalf, it's advisable that you complete steps for the process such as a flowchart or decision tree. We can see in my example chart here that this shows the rules that we just saw in a more easy to follow format. Charts like this help break down the criteria to a level where the right conditions can be applied to achieve the automated decisioning as accurately as possible. Break it down to as fine a detail as required and objectively ask as you go through, what question or check can we perform in order to test this? We can see from our sample several checks that our decision card will carry out. The first being rule number 1, is the client an individual? This is a good example of breaking a question right down to the finer detail, as the end objective is actually to determine whether the client or applicant is old enough to apply. But before we get to the age question, we can narrow it down further to whether the applying entity is an individual or not. By completing this check, we can instantly skip the irrelevant questions if the applying entity is, say, a company. If, in the case of this decision card, if the client is not an individual, an instant failure will occur and provide an outcome message of client is not an individual. This is achieved by having the outcome rule in its own if block before it gets to the next set of rules. In this image, I've added numbers attached to each of the corresponding rules, which translate over to the rules page. So this one is literally rule 1. In case anyone wishes to review this in more depth by pausing the YouTube video and reviewing this side by side with our sample DC app decision card. Again, charts like this are super helpful for anyone constructing a decision card or a workflow even, as typically the person building these doesn't work in the day-to-day process they're built for. So as much detail on the process as possible is great. Back again to the test page, as we saw before, the decision card admin library also includes a test facility, which allows you to test as you go to make sure your rules or scripting are testing the condition as you'd expect. We have the 2 sample decision cards, one being the ID check and the other being the sample application decisioning tool. For the purposes of this demonstration, we'll use the test function on the decision card form itself. The ID check decision card shows another way in which decision cards can be used, with this one checking the client has enough acceptable identification as mentioned earlier to meet the 100-point requirement. Again, if we tested this on Amelia's sample, we see the same results that we saw on the client page and the informative result showing exactly where the gaps are with the indication on and identification on file, providing the end user quickly with the important information. We covered how this works on a client group and in the client form, but potentially the decision card results might not be informing a user at all. If used in a workflow, for example, the outcome could be triggering another automated process, such as an email to the client stating further identification evidence is required. I also made a third decision card just for the purposes of this session, which shows the examples using the overdue balance condition test. If I test this on a different account, it gives me a result of refer. This could be used in an overdue workflow as an example. For the purposes of this example, we have a hypothetical workflow that calls this decision card. The results here show us that the account is overdue, but is also in a hardship monitor category. However, they also have a different monitor category of soft collections, meaning that they had a hardship arrangement, but are not currently meeting their obligations. Giving an outcome of refer prompts the workflow to be recalled for a collection staff member to assess and make a soft call, whereas an outcome of pass would have continued with automated collections actions, such as sending an email, SMS, or letter, or perhaps registering a credit bureau default. A fail outcome would have prompted the workflow to close, as the outcome was the account was no longer overdue. Before we finish up for this session, I wanted to provide some other real-world context for typical custom decision cards. Examples include scripted options to review a response from a bank statement inquiry, which has the potential to not only take the guesswork out of analysing bank statements, but reduces instances of human error. Options to interpret responses from credit inquiries and make decisions based on results, and decisions on whether or not commission is payable on certain deals. Decisions, as we've shown, for collections workflows, hardship decisioning, and much, much more. As I said earlier, the sky is the limit. We've come to the end of our session for today, but as always, if there's any additional information you seek, don't hesitate to contact application support for any user interface queries or code support in relation to code-specific questions.